This is RTP. This is RTP180.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Sometimes it's easier to express a particular concept in one language than it is another. As an example, think about music notation. It's sort of like a language, and when you perform it, you can think of it like reading out loud. Now, the particular notation that we use has evolved over hundreds of years into a very compact and efficient and effective way for a composer to communicate their ideas to the performer. Now, as an example of translating into another language, of course, we could communicate the same information with English words, but I'm sure you could appreciate that this is very awkward and inefficient and not anything as effective as the elegant notation that we use in music. Well, there are different languages in physics too, and all of the objects and motions that we experience in our everyday life are governed by what we refer to as the laws of classical mechanics. This includes the computer on your desk as well as in your pocket. On the other hand, if we look at the scale of atoms, molecules, and particles, things are very different. At that scale, nature obeys a different set of laws, the laws of quantum mechanics. And as a result, some very strange things that happen, at least from the perspective of our intuition from everyday experience. Now, it turns out that classical computers, in principle, can do any calculation. However, sometimes it's difficult to do the calculation because it's not well suited. One of the examples might be in fact, you can do quantum computing with a classical computer. And if it's a relatively small number of particles, then it's not very difficult to do. But every time you add a particle, then it gets twice as complicated. So in very short order, it gets out of hand. This is illustrated by these stacks of coins, where every stack is twice as high as the one before it. So even though in principle, it's possible for a classical computer to do any calculation, for some calculations, it may take so long, even with a supercomputer, that in practical measure, it can't be done. But in contrast, suppose you had a computer that naturally used the laws of quantum mechanics to actually do the calculation. Perhaps it could do the calculation rapidly and efficiently, sort of like the music notation is an elegant and efficient way of communicating information from the composer to the performer. So what are some of the things that quantum computers can do? Well, because quantum computers obey the laws or do their calculation along the laws of quantum mechanics, and atoms and molecules also are governed by quantum mechanics, perhaps it's not a surprise that one of the applications that's most promising is understanding large atoms and molecules. IBM's Jeanette Garcia uses thalidomide as an example. Thalidomide was used to treat morning sickness in the 1950s in Germany. However, it turns out it caused significant birth defects and was banned in 1962. Dr. Garcia points out that it took about 50 years to really understand what happened and why that happened. Imagine if we had a quantum computer that could help us understand complicated molecules like thalidomide. Perhaps we could prevent tragedies of that sort and perhaps even discover new treatments. Now, there are other problems that are difficult for classical computers to solve besides quantum mechanical problems. They're either difficult or they take a very long time or they're beyond the capability of current computers. Perhaps if those problems could be translated into the language of quantum computers, that those calculations could be done more quickly and more efficiently as well. We believe that will be the case in applications such as finding the optimum solution to a complex problem, or improving the accuracy and performance of machine learning, or even doing a risk assessment for financial portfolios and things of that sort. Another example might be, imagine if you had the ability to create ad hoc airline schedules every day in response to unexpected delays. A quantum computer that could do that could perhaps increase or reduce the travel delay as well as fuel costs. The catch is that to realize these advantages of quantum computing, you need a processor that's much bigger than what we have today. The processors that we have today are sort of like the computers in the late 1940s with vacuum tubes and so forth. It'll probably be decades before we have a processor that is capable of really realizing the potential of quantum computing. However, things are moving much more quickly today than they did in the late 1940s. And this is partly because of the size of the global investment, as well as the ability to harness the open source community through the cloud. Consequently, we expect that sometime in the 2020s that quantum advantages in computation will be observed. So, it's going to be an exciting ride. Thank you.